The bar was dimly lit, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city where even the most determined gossip-mongers seldom ventured. Elena Alvarez had chosen it for precisely that reason. She wanted to vanish, if only for an hour. The glass of wine in front of her was untouched, the condensation trailing down its stem like a reminder of how little she belonged anywhere tonight. Tomorrow would be the gala. The family gala. The word itself made her stomach tighten. A celebration of tradition, wealth, and social power, attended by men and women who spoke in coded words and smiled with sharpened teeth. Every cousin, every aunt, every sibling of hers would be there with their perfectly chosen partners, each one a polished gemstone presented for approval. Elena, however, would arrive alone again, and that, in her family's eyes, was an unforgivable flaw. She had heard the whispers already. Poor Elena, still so careless, so naive. Can't even keep a man long enough to sit at her side. She swirled the wine in her glass. Though her throat was too tight to drink, it wasn't about romance, not really. It was about appearances. A partner meant stability, respectability, worthiness. Of the legacy she'd been born into but never truly wanted. Without one, she was the weak link, the stain on the Alvarez name. You look like someone planning her own funeral, a voice said from the shadows beside her. She glanced up, startled. He was seated 2 stools away, half in the dark, watching her with an unsettling calm. Tall, lean, dressed in a suit that looked neither new nor old, but tailored perfectly to his frame. His eyes were the kind of gray that carried storms in their depths. "Excuse me?" Elena managed, tightening her grip on her glass. He tilted his head, offering the faintest trace of a smile. That expression. It's the same one I've seen on gamblers about to wager their last chip, or liars about to be caught. The remark stung, because it was too close to the truth. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, perhaps a little too sharply. "Don't you?" His smile grew, just enough to reveal the confidence of someone who knew he had unsettled her. He leaned closer, the light catching the scar that ran just beneath his jawline, faint but impossible to miss once noticed. "You need something. Something you're desperate enough to risk asking a stranger for. Am I wrong?" Elena's chest tightened. The rational part of her screamed to ignore him, to pay her bill and walk away. But the weight of tomorrow pressed on her shoulders, heavier with every second. Her family would tear her apart without mercy. Her voice faltered. She hated herself for what she was about to say. "I need someone, for tomorrow, just for one night." The stranger's gaze sharpened, as though he'd been waiting for the words. He leaned in so close that she caught the faint scent of cedar and smoke clinging to him. His whisper slid into her ear, quiet and deliberate. "I'll pretend to be your man," he said, each word deliberate, steady. "But don't forget debt has its price." Elena's breath caught. His tone wasn't flirtatious, nor was it playful. It was a contract written in sound. "Why would you even agree?" she asked, half daring, half terrified of the answer. "Because I like debts," he replied simply, pulling back enough to study her face. "They're more binding than promises. People honor them more fiercely, because they know the cost of ignoring them." For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. The hum of the bar faded. The clink of glasses vanished. All Elena could hear was the pounding of her own heart. She should have walked away. She knew that. But desperation had sharp claws, and tonight it dug too deeply. "Fine," she whispered. "Just one night." His smile returned, slow and unreadable. He raised his glass in a mock toast, the scar by his jaw catching the light again. "One night," he echoed. "And then, we'll see what it costs you." The Alvarez gala glittered like a jeweled crown under 1,000 chandeliers. Gold leaf, panels, champagne fountains, and a string quartet that seemed to play without ever stopping. It was extravagance woven into sound and light. Elena stood just outside the ballroom's arched entrance, her breath shallow, her nerves knotted. She had always hated these gatherings. To her, they felt less like parties and more like trials, and tonight she had brought a stranger to stand beside her. Lucien's presence at her side was both anchor and flame. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back, steady but never intrusive. He wore the same tailored confidence she had seen at the bar, though under the glow of the chandeliers it seemed almost regal. He looked as though he belonged here, which made Elena's heart pound with both relief and suspicion. "Relax," he murmured, his voice just low enough for her alone. "You'll unravel the illusion before we even step inside." She darted a glance at him. "Easy for you to say. You don't have every person in that room waiting to dissect you." "Ah," Lucien replied with a faint smile, "but I do." Before she could question him, he guided her forward, his touch commanding, yet strangely protective. The crowd turned. Conversations faltered, heads tilted. In an instant, the room assessed them, the way predators judge new arrivals in their territory. Elena braced herself, yet what came was not the usual wave of whispers about her solitude. Instead, murmurs rose about them. About him, her cousin Isabella, always the first to strike, approached with a practiced smile. "Elena, darling, and who is this?" Her eyes raked Lucien like a jeweler studying a diamond for flaws. Lucien answered before Elena could form a lie. He extended a hand, his tone smooth but layered with just enough warmth to seem genuine. "Lucien Moreau. Elena has told me so much about her family. I've been eager to meet you." Isabella blinked, her smile tightening, thrown off balance. Elena nearly choked on her shock. He hadn't stumbled. He hadn't hesitated. The lie rolled off his tongue as if he had rehearsed it 100 times. And it worked. Isabella, who could, sent weakness a mile away, faltered. For the first time in years, Elena watched her cousin retreat without a cutting remark. "You didn't tell me you were that good at lying." Elena whispered once Isabella was gone. "I'm not lying," Lucien said softly, turning his glass of champagne in his hand. His eyes caught the light, glinting silver. "I'm acting. There's a difference." Through the night, Lucien played his part with unsettling perfection. He laughed at the right moments, steered conversations when Elena faltered, and shielded her from prying questions with a kind of effortless command. When relatives pressed him for details, he offered half-truths wrapped in velvet, never revealing anything concrete yet leaving no space for doubt. And all the while, he never let go of Elena's hand. It was a subtle gesture, easy to overlook. In the crowded ballroom, but to her it meant something different with each passing moment. At first, it steadied her, calmed the trembling she couldn't quite hide. But as the hours wore on, she realized the warmth of his touch had become a tether. Each squeeze of his fingers sent heat crawling up her skin. Each brush of his thumb a silent reminder that he was not just shielding her. He was claiming her. At one point, he leaned close, his breath grazing her ear as he whispered, "Smile. Elena, everyone is watching, and right now they believe you're the luckiest woman in this room." Her lips obeyed, curving into the most natural smile she had ever worn at one of these events. And for a fleeting second she believed him. But beneath the illusion, questions gnawed at her. How could a stranger move so fluidly in her world? How did he know how to disarm Isabella or parry her uncle's suspicious inquiries, or address her grandmother with the exact blend of reverence and charm? By the time the gala reached its peak, Elena's confusion had shifted into unease. Lucien was flawless, too flawless. His mask did not slip, not even once, and she began to suspect that maybe it wasn't a mask at all. The gala ended in a haze of polite applause, fading music, and the lingering scent of roses and expensive perfume. Elena managed to keep her composure until the final goodbye was spoken, until every last set of eyes released her from their scrutiny. Only then did she allow herself to exhale, the knot in her chest finally loosening. Lucien, still perfectly collected, guided her out through the gilded doors. His hand never wavered from her back, steadying her steps as if she were something fragile he had sworn to protect. When they reached the quiet night air, Elena spun toward him, words tumbling out before she could restrain them. "You were incredible." In there, her voice shook with relief. They believed every word. "I don't know how you don't have to know," Lucien interrupted, his tone calm but laced with something sharper. He straightened his cuffs, his gaze flicking to hers like steel catching light. "You only have to remember what I told you." Elena's relief cooled into unease. "About debts," she whispered. He nodded. "Every debt has its price." The words slid between them like a blade. She wanted to argue, to laugh it off, to tell him that one night of pretending at a gala didn't mean she owed him anything beyond gratitude. But his eyes held hers with unnerving steadiness, and she realized gratitude was far too small a currency for whatever game he was playing. "Then tell me," Elena said, folding her arms, summoning courage she wasn't sure she possessed. "What exactly is the price?" Lucien's smile curved, slow and deliberate, like a predator savoring the moment before the strike. "That," he said, "is not for tonight." Her stomach nodded. "So you're just going to leave me guessing?" "Yes." His answer was so simple it unsettled her more than if he'd asked for money or favors or worse. "You'll know when it's time, and when I call it in, you'll say yes." "You sound awfully sure of that," she snapped. Though the chill running through her betrayed her bravado, Lucien's eyes softened, but not kindly. "Because you already did. When you whispered fine, just one night in that bar, you agreed." "Don't look so surprised that I listened carefully." His memory of that moment sent a flush to her cheeks. She wanted to claim he'd twisted her words, that she hadn't meant it like that. But she couldn't. She had said it. And the way he said her words back to her, low and smooth, made her heart pound in ways that had nothing to do with fear. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, summoned of course without her noticing. Lucien opened the door and gestured for her to enter, as though this night had always been his to command. On the drive home, silence stretched between them, taut and alive. Elena stared out the window, trying to slow her thoughts, but every reflection in the glass showed Lucien's profile, calm, sharp, unreadable. Finally, she couldn't stand it. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why agree to this at all? You could have walked away." He didn't look at her, but she saw the faintest flicker of a smile in the glass. "Because your family believes in masks, and I happen to be very good at wearing them." The answer chilled her. It wasn't about her. Or maybe it was, but not in the way she wanted. When the car stopped at her apartment, Lucien leaned toward her. For one breathless instant, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear and whispered, "Sleep well, Elena. Tonight you were untouchable. Remember who made that possible." Then he was gone, the echo of his words lingering like smoke. Standing alone in the silence of her doorway, Elena finally admitted what she had been afraid to since the moment she met him. She was no longer in control. 3 days passed before Elena saw Lucien again. 3 days of silence that should have brought relief, but instead left her restless, checking her phone with every vibration, half expecting him to appear out of nowhere. She told herself it was dread, but the knot in her stomach felt too tangled with something else, something she didn't want to name. When he did appear, it wasn't at her door or in a quiet bar. It was at her office. She returned from a late meeting to find him seated casually at the edge of her desk, as though he owned the building. His dark suit blended into the shadowed room, but his eyes glimmered like steel catching the moonlight. You shouldn't be here, Elena hissed, shutting the door quickly. If anyone sees you, they'll assume I belong here, Lucien interrupted smoothly. Much like they assumed I belonged at your gala. The reminder made her skin prickle. What do you want, Lucien? He tilted his head as if amused by the question. You, Elena, but not in the way you're thinking. His gaze lingered on her long enough to make her heart race before he slid a sealed envelope across the desk. I need you to attend a dinner with me tomorrow night. Business, not pleasure. You'll sit at my side, smile when necessary, and say very little. She stared at the envelope as though it might burn her fingers. No, whatever this is, I'm not getting involved. Lucien leaned forward, his voice soft but sharp enough to cut through her refusal. You already are involved. You were involved the moment you let me walk into your world. That night wasn't a favor, it was a bargain. And this, he tapped the envelope, is me calling it in. Elena swallowed, her throat dry. Why me? You could bring anyone. Not anyone, he replied. His expression hardened, the charm slipping just enough to reveal something colder beneath. They know your name. They know your family. And when you sit beside me, it tells. Them I have their attention. Her pulse quickened. Them? Who are you talking about? For the first time, Lucien's smile lacked amusement. Men who make your family look like saints. Men who don't trust easily. Men who will be watching you very carefully tomorrow night. A chill swept through her. She should refuse. Walk away. Tell him to find someone else to play his games. With. But even as the words formed in her mind, her voice betrayed her. What happens if I say no? She whispered. Lucien's gray eyes darkened, though his tone never rose. Then the next time your family whispers about you, it won't be because you arrived alone. It will be because you disappeared. The words landed like ice in her veins. Yet beneath the fear, another truth twisted deep inside her. She didn't want to say no. Not entirely. Fine, she breathed, hating the tremor in her voice. One dinner, that's it. Lucien's smile returned slow, measured, and far too satisfied. Good girl. The way he said it made her chest tighten, her pride warring. With the strange heat that pooled low in her stomach as he stood to leave, he brushed past her, close enough that she felt the whisper of his coat against her arm. Wear something red tomorrow, he murmured, his breath grazing her ear. You'll want them to remember you. And then he was gone, leaving the envelope on her desk like a sealed fate. Elena sank into her chair, staring at it as though opening it would unravel the last thread of her safety. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her safety had already unraveled the moment she let Lucien Moreau whisper in her ear. Tomorrow night, she wasn't just playing pretend anymore. She was stepping into his world. A dangerous game, and she had no idea of the rules. The dinner was everything Lucien had promised, opulent, tense, and dangerous in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. The men at the table spoke in veiled phrases, trading polite smiles that never touched their eyes. She recognized a few surnames. Ones whispered in her family with caution, if not outright fear. Lucien commanded the room effortlessly, his hand occasionally brushing hers under the table, anchoring her in the storm. But it was afterward, in the quiet of her own apartment, that the cracks began to show. She kicked off her heels, exhaustion pressing against her bones. The red dress Lucien had insisted she wear still clung to her like a brand. Every gaze from dinner burned into the fabric. She reached for the envelope he'd left her days ago, still sealed in the drawer of her desk. For hours she had resisted opening it. But tonight, curiosity outweighed fear. Inside were documents. Names, dates, transactions. And tucked between the pages, a photograph. Her breath caught. It was her father. Younger, sharper, standing beside a man Elena didn't recognize. And behind them, in the blurred background of the image, a familiar figure lurked. Lucien. Elena dropped the photo as though it had scalded her fingers. She picked it up again, staring at it in disbelief. The image was dated nearly 15 years ago. Lucien looked exactly the same, not younger, not older. Exactly the same. Her pulse hammered. She told herself it was a trick of the light, a coincidence, a resemblance. But the scar on his jawline was unmistakable. The next day, she confronted him. He was waiting for her, of course, leaning against the hood of a sleek black car outside her building as though he had been there all morning. "You opened it," he said before she spoke, his eyes unreadable. "You were in that photo." Elena blurted, clutching her bag tightly to her chest. "With my father, 15 years ago. And you look exactly the same. How is that possible?" Lucien studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You notice more than I expected." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed calmly. "It isn't." Her frustration flared. "Who are you, Lucien, really? Because you can't keep telling me this is just a game when you were tied to my family long before I met you." His gaze softened, though it made her no less uneasy. "I told you from the start, Elena, every debt has its price. Your father owed far more than he ever admitted. And now, here you are." Her chest tightened. "So this isn't about me at all. It's about him." "It was," Lucien said quietly, stepping closer, his presence filling the space between them. "But you've complicated things." Heat surged up her neck. "Don't do that. Don't act like this is like this. Is something else. You've been lying since the beginning." Lucien's hand lifted, almost brushing her cheek before he stopped himself. "No, Elena, I've been pretending. There's a difference." The word cut deeper than she wanted it to. Pretending. Like the gala. Like the way he touched her, looked at her, whispered to her. But if it was all an illusion, why did his eyes look so unguarded now, as though he wanted her to believe him? Elena stepped back, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "If you want me to stay in this, then you'd better start telling me the truth. Because right now, I don't know if I'm standing next to a man or a ghost." For the first time since she'd met him, Lucien's mask slipped. Just slightly, but enough. His smile faltered, his jaw tightened, and something ancient flickered in his gaze, something that frightened her more than any of his threats. "Maybe," he whispered, so softly she almost missed it. "I'm both." The storm broke on a Thursday. Evening. Elena had just returned from another long day at the office, her mind still buzzing with fragments of suspicion about the photo, about her father, about Lucien's words that refused to leave her alone. She thought she would have one night of peace, one chance to breathe. Instead, she found Lucien waiting in her living room. The door had been locked, the windows bolted. And yet there he was, standing in the dim light as though the shadows themselves had let him in. He didn't speak immediately, and for a heartbeat Elena wondered if she was hallucinating. "You can't keep doing this," she said, her voice trembling between fear and fury. "Breaking into my life whenever you feel like it. I'm not your pawn." Lucien's gaze settled on her, heavy and deliberate. "You're right. You're not a pawn. You're a queen, which makes you far more valuable and far more dangerous." She ignored the heat that crept up her neck. "What do you want?" He stepped forward, the faintest smile playing at his lips. "What I'm owed." Her stomach dropped. "You mean the debt?" Lucien nodded. "Your father borrowed from men who don't forgive. He made promises he couldn't keep, promises that cost lives. I was there when he sealed those bargains, and I was there when he broke them. Now his debts fall to you." Elena's knees weakened, but she forced herself to stand tall. "That's not fair. I never asked for this." I never agreed to any of it. You agreed the night you asked me to be your man, Lucien countered softly, but his eyes were sharp, unyielding. You invited me in, Elena. You chose to take the mask I offered, to let me shield you. And now you'll stand beside me when it matters most. Her pulse quickened. What does that even mean? He reached into his coat and slid a sleek folder onto her coffee table. The pages inside were crisp, filled with names and photographs that made her blood run cold. Men she recognized from whispered warnings at family dinners. Men her father had cursed under his breath. You're going to accompany me to a meeting, Lucien said. Not a dinner, not a performance. A reckoning. Tomorrow night, these men will decide whether to crush your family or leave them standing. And your presence at my side will tilt the scales. Elena's throat closed. You want me to stand there while you gamble with everything? I want you to show them that the Alvarez family trusts me. That you trust me. His voice lowered, dangerous in its calm. Because if you don't, they'll know I've been bluffing. And when they discover the bluff, they'll burn your family to the ground. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This was it. The price. Not money, not favors her loyalty. Her public loyalty, a declaration that she stood with Lucien against men her father had spent his life avoiding. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You can't make me choose. Like this. Lucien stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek, achingly gentle despite the fire in his eyes. Elena, this isn't a choice. This is survival. You stand with me, or you fall with them. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. And what happens to me if I stand with you? His lips curved into a smile that was equal. Parts promise and threat. Then you stop being a debt. You become an investment. The words left her trembling, not from fear alone, but from the dangerous heat in his voice. The way he spoke of her as though she were already his dot and deep. Inside, a treacherous part of her wondered if she had been his all along. The meeting took place in an abandoned theater, its velvet curtains rotting, its gilded balconies tarnished with dust. Yet despite the decay, the place pulsed with menace. Men in dark suits filled the front rows where once an audience might have sat. Their faces were carved from stone, their gazes sharp enough to cut. Elena's heels clicked softly against the warped floorboards as she entered at Lucien's side. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and run, but Lucien's hand anchored her, steady and certain at the small of her back. Remember, he whispered, his breath brushing her ear. They will see only what you choose to show them. Choose wisely. She lifted her chin, though her hands trembled at her sides. The men regarded her with thinly veiled suspicion. One of them, older, with silver hair and a scar bisecting his eyebrow, spoke first. This is the Alvarez girl? The daughter? Yes, Lucien replied smoothly, his voice carrying like a command. And she is here to make it clear that. Her family stands behind me. Elena froze. The words struck like a lash. This was it, the line she had sworn she would not cross. To claim Lucien openly was to betray her father's memory, to invite wrath into her bloodline. The silver-haired man's gaze shifted to her. Is that true, girl? Do you stand with him? The silence stretched, heavy as chains. Elena's chest tightened until she thought she might shatter under the weight of every eye on her dot. She thought of her father, his voice bitter whenever Lucien's name had slipped through his lips. She thought of the photo, of debts and secrets buried so deep they had poisoned everything. But she also thought of the gala, of Lucien's hand steady on hers when she faltered, of his whisper in her ear, "Smile, Elena, everyone is watching." Of the truth he had repeated again and again, every debt has its price. Her lips parted before she could stop herself. Yes, she said, her voice clear despite the trembling in her chest. I stand with him. The words shocked her more than anyone else. They fell from her mouth like a confession, and the moment they left her, she knew she could never take them back. A murmur rippled through the theater. The silver-haired man leaned back, studying her with new interest. "Brave," he said, "or foolish?" Lucien's grip tightened briefly at her back, silent approval. His smile was faint but lethal as he turned back to the room. "Now you understand. The Alvarez family is no longer your concern. They are mine." The men exchanged glances, measuring the weight of the declaration. No one moved to challenge him. For tonight, at least, the illusion held. When the meeting ended and the shadows released them, Elena's knees nearly buckled. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp, a cruel reminder that the world hadn't stopped turning just because hers had. She turned on Lucien. The moment they reached the car, "I can't believe I just did that." Her voice was hoarse, raw. "I swore I wouldn't. I swore. You chose survival," Lucien said simply, sliding into the driver's seat. His gray eyes caught hers, unreadable in the darkness. "And survival is never betrayal. Not when the world is built on debts and power." Elena shook her head, pressing her hands to her face. "You don't understand. I betrayed myself." For a moment, silence filled the car. Then Lucien reached across the console, his hand closing around hers with startling gentleness. "No," he murmured, his voice low and dangerous in its tenderness. "You've claimed yourself. You just don't see it yet." Her heart hammered. Torn between fury and something far more dangerous belief. Because for the first time in her life, Elena felt that maybe she wasn't the pawn or the weak link her family had painted her to be. Maybe she was something else entirely, and that terrified her most of all. The city stretched wide and sleepless outside Elena's window. From her apartment's high vantage point, she could see the world continuing as though nothing had changed. Lights glittering in towers, strangers hurrying down sidewalks, lives untouched by the choice she had made. But for her, everything had changed. She stood barefoot on the cool floor, still in the black dress she had worn to the theater the night before. Her reflection in the glass looked like someone else, someone stronger, sharper, with eyes that no longer belonged entirely to the girl who used to dread her family's whispers. Behind her, Lucien moved in silence. He didn't ask to stay. He never asked. He was simply there, pouring 2 glasses of wine as though this were his home. "You're quiet," he said finally, his voice carrying across the room like smoke. Elena turned, searching his face for cracks. He looked unchanged, flawless, composed, the same as he had been in that 15-year-old photograph. And yet, she thought she saw something in him she hadn't before. Weariness, almost sorrow. "Last night," she said, her voice low, "I told them I stood with you. And I did, but I still don't know if I meant it." Lucien crossed the room, handing her a glass. His fingers brushed hers, lingering just long enough to stir heat in her chest. "Meaning comes later. What matters is that you spoke the words. In their world, words are more binding than blood." She set the glass down untouched. "And what about in your world? Do words bind you?" His smile curved, soft and dangerous. "My world is built on debts, Elena, not words." She shivered, though not from the cold. "So what am I now? A debt still unpaid?" Lucien stepped closer until the space between them vanished. He lifted her chin with the lightest touch, forcing her to meet his storm-gray gaze. "No, you are the price that was paid and the prize that remains." Her breath caught. "That sounds a lot like ownership, does it?" He murmured, his lips so close she could feel the warmth of his breath. "Or does it sound like something you've been searching for all along, a place where you are more than your family's?" Shadow? The words cut deep because they weren't entirely wrong. For years, Elena had been measured by her family's standards and found lacking. Last night, for the first time, she had been more than a disappointment. She had been decisive, powerful, and she couldn't deny Lucien had given her that dot, but at what cost? She pulled back just enough to breathe, her voice trembling. What happens if I decide I don't want this, if I walk away? Lucien's smile faded, replaced by a stillness that chilled her more than any threat. Then you'll learn that debts don't vanish, Elena. They only change hands. And I would rather keep you than let anyone else claim you. The words should have terrified her. Perhaps they did. Yet the way he said them, quiet, certain, tinged with something that might have been longing, sent her heart into chaos. For a long moment, they stood in silence, caught between danger and desire, between freedom and surrender. Finally, Elena whispered the only truth she could manage. I don't know if I'm falling in love with you, or if I'm just falling into your trap. Lucien's lips brushed her temple, feather-light, his whisper sliding into her ear like a promise and a curse all at once. Maybe they're the same thing. Her eyes closed, her body leaning into his despite every warning in her mind. Because perhaps he was right. Perhaps love and traps, debts and choices were never separate at all. And as the city lights burned outside, Elena understood. Whatever price she had paid, she would never be free of it. Not of him. Never of him.